yesterday we also had a few people. Okay, we're now streaming live on YouTube. I will start the webinar and then I will wait a bit until people are dropping in. Okay, we are indeed live, and I see that people are connecting. And this also means that I can warmly welcome all of you to the second session of the EUKN-OECD Week of National Urban Policies, focused on the just dimension of national urban policies. And while I am sure that most of you know the OECD and almost as many also know the EUKN, let me nonetheless introduce the EUKN briefly. The EUKN is the only independent member state-driven network in the field, and I think I should say at the intersection of urban policy, research and practice. Strategic knowledge support and peer learning on all things urban. That's what we do. That's at the core of what we do. The EUKN has its secretariat seated in The Hague in the Netherlands, and the current range of members, group of members is Belgium, Czechia, Germany, Spain, France, Poland, Portugal, and Slovenia, our distinguished members. And they are all present during this week of national urban policies, either as presenters or as participants. So welcome also to you. And to make this session a bit more interesting for us all, I'm not alone, but I am accompanied by Sena Segbetsi from the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. She will be co-moderating with me, and she'll introduce herself and her work on Inter alia, the Champion Mayors Initiative, in a moment. But welcome also to you, Sena, and great to have you on board. Now, as I said, we're here as part of a week of national urban policy. And to some extent, that week already started last Friday, when the OECD, together with UN Habitat and Cities Alliance, presented the 2021 Global State of National Urban Policy report. Please do follow the chat for the relevant links. It's a really, really good read. And yesterday, the week really kicked off on Monday, and we had a really interesting opening session where we discussed national urban policy developments in some of our member countries, and also how they link with the new Leipzig Charter. And then we have today, where we discuss the just dimension of national urban policies. And finally, tomorrow we'll round off the week with 2 more sessions on the productive and on the green dimensions. Now, you might wonder, why would anyone organize an entire week of national urban policies? Well, for us at the EUKN and also for the colleagues at the OECD, the answer is quite simple. It's at the core of what we do. It's a fascinating topic. It's quite a relevant topic too. And I think during yesterday's session where we discussed these issues in a bit more at more meta level, so to speak, in their entirety, we learned that national urban policies, they mean very different things in different countries, depending on things such as, well, a country's constitutional structure, which is very much, of course, also informed by the past, the political culture, recent societal developments, etc. But there are also important commonalities that we heard of, such as the conviction that NUPs really need to be co-created with local, often also regional, where that applies, levels of government, and with a whole range of stakeholders. This really shows to be something like a necessary condition for successful national urban policies. But okay, today it's all about the just city. And that's something that many people, researchers, it's a big thing in academic research, I know, but also policymakers and probably first and foremost urban dwellers themselves have been trying to sort of make sense of and ultimately trying to approximate, you know, what is the just city? How can we make sure cities are and urban contexts can make everyone thrive regardless of where they come from or what they have? And the new Leipzig Charter puts forward a very strong notion of the just city. And for those of you who don't know the new Leipzig Charter, here's just a bit of context, because it's quite an important document for us for this entire week of national urban policies. The new Leipzig Charter is a strategic framework document that has been endorsed by ministers responsible for urban matters in the EU in November 2020. So it's quite still almost fresh off the press. And that was under German presidency. The new Leipzig Charter has the paradigmatic title, The Transformative Power of Cities for the Common Good. And next to being a very elaborate and comprehensive document, I mean, it's not a one-pager. The NLC, sorry, that's what I often refer to it as, the new Leipzig Charter, I should say. It also contains a very catchy notion, namely that of the just, the green, and the productive city, complemented by a cross-cutting digital dimension of urban development. So these three cities, we're using them also for our Week of National Urban Policies, because we believe it's really worthwhile to dig more into these three elements of national urban policies. And I think if we have one common thing, one overarching question to explore together today, that is, what does the just city mean in the context of national urban policies? And we hope you already have a lot of thoughts on this yourself and questions ready. And we hope those will become more after you've heard the presentations of the three national urban policies from Germany, Slovenia, and France. But that's it from my side. And I would like to hand over to Sena to introduce herself, her work with the Champion Mayors Initiative, and also briefly walk you through the program and the objective of today. So Sena, over to you.
Hello, thanks, Leah. Hello, everyone. I'm Sena Segbedzi. I'm from the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities, where I manage a mayors network called the Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth. And we're 64 mayors from around the world that are united in the quest to challenge inequality in cities and also to advance inclusive growth in the education system, in the labor market, in the housing market and urban environment in general, and through infrastructure and public service access. So certainly the mayors are especially excited when there is an enabling environment at the regional, but also the national level. And the national urban policies, of course, help set the pace and the agenda and the ability for mayors at the local level and city leaders across the world to advance inclusion and hopefully reach this just city. So I'm especially happy to be here. The OECD has been committed to working on national urban policy for several years now, and recently launched the Global State of National Urban Policy report, which comes with 10 high-level recommendations to help policy makers design national urban policy, and hopefully also to guide the use of the new Leipzig Charter. So just to remind us why we're here today, it's to talk about the just dimension of national urban policies. And we have here a very exciting and wonderful panel with us through three members from different countries that will be speaking about their national urban policies and the roles that it can play in creating a just city. So we have here Dominique Breyer from Germany, who will be speaking about the just dimension there. We have Sabrina Abdi from France, who will be speaking about the just dimension of French national policy, urban policy. And we have actually two speakers from Slovenia, Blanka Bartol and Tomáš Miklavsik, to speak about the just dimension of national urban policies in Slovenia. So before I take too much time, and because we want to hear what our panelists have to say, I'll tell you briefly about the run of show. We'll be spending the next hour together hearing from our panelists about brief presentations about their urban policies and how they are pushing for this just dimension. And then we'll have a short break and enter into a lively discussion with our panelists. So we do encourage you to use the chat and question and answer function to send your questions through, and we'll build it into the discussion. And without further ado, I give the floor back to Leah, who will send us into our first activity.
That's true, Senna. Thank you very much. Indeed. Well, you've heard a bit about who we are, who the speakers are, and now, as we don't see you, participants, we would like to hear via a poll who you are, where you come from, or what kind of organization you represent. So you should see it popping up, and it will be great. I think this is easy for everyone to fill in. And I also see people reacting immediately. That's a test if you're all awake. And as it seems you are, I'll leave it on a couple of more seconds so you can also see it. But it's a nice distribution that I see here, a bit comparable to yesterday. Okay, I'll show the result. So indeed, the national level within the EU, this is kind of our main constituents as EUKN, and partly, of course, also for the OECD. But it's great to see that there are also a couple of people joining us from outside the EU. That's of course also one of the reasons we're having this cooperation, international organization and academia. Well, from you, from academia, we of course expect a very sharp question. So looking forward to that. And well, I would like to do another poll with you, which is more about the just dimension that well, we introduced, and to ask you, this one is a bit more tricky, whether you feel that the just dimension is an important aspect of your country's national urban policy. So you can go for a yes, absolutely, yes to some extent, no, not really, or if you say NUP, I'm not sure if we have that in my country, let alone if it does anything about just equitable, inclusive cities, then this is the one you need to select. And also here I see people are actively voting. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds and then end the poll and share the results with you. And that's encouraging. So the just dimension seems to be an important aspect of half of countries and UPs that are here in this session. And yeah, well, I think that that's indeed something we should take as an encouraging factor, but then also, well, see in what way we can learn more about what this actually means in countries. So this just dimension in national urban policies, how is this actually taking shape? Thanks a lot for joining in this. And with that, I would like to invite Dominique to the floor. I will also briefly introduce you. Dominique Breyer works at the German Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community, and at the Urban Policy Unit. So that is the unit, I should say, that has been the collective mastermind behind the new Leipzig Charter. So Dominique and her colleagues really know everything about the new Leipzig Charter. But that's not the only thing they do. They're also responsible for shaping the federal level national urban policy in Germany. So that's a perfect combination. And that is also what Dominique is going to share with us and talk to us about, what the German national urban development policy is and does, and what it means for the just dimension. Dominique, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. And let me just start my presentation. Just a minute. All right. Can you see it? Wonderful, perfect. All right, thank you very much, Leah. So I've already been properly introduced. So what I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, our national urban policy in general. What is it about? How it came to be the thing that it is today. And I'm also going to present 2 examples of pilot projects that we are funding, just to get a glimpse of what we are actually doing and how we are also exploiting that. I should say that I also have a background in academia, and I also did a lot of research on urban planning, urban development, and also particularly on the common good. So I'm very curious about the questions people from academia have brought with them. So the national urban development policy in Germany, I'm also mentioning the German name of it, just so in case you want to Google it, but you will also find a lot of information on it in English. So if we want to talk about the national urban policy in Germany, it's definitely worth looking back at how this whole thing actually came about. Back in 2007, as Leah has already mentioned, the Leipzig Charter was adopted under German EU presidency, and it also had the intention to be the starting, well, to be the initial point to start a national urban policy for us, and also to put the common good at the forefront of it and also at the core of it. And basically what we had in mind, based on the Leipzig Charter, the original Leipzig Charter, so to say, is that we wanted to focus more or less on less privileged neighborhoods, the ones that, you know, are suffering the most from inequality, social polarization, and so on. So in 2007, we launched this whole initiative, and it's basically a joint initiative which follows an integrated approach. As you can see in this graph, it's a cooperation and a joint initiative of both the federal government, the state governments, as we are a very decentralized country with states with a lot of responsibilities and competences, and then of course also the local level, which is basically responsible for planning, for the zoning plans and so on, so they're pretty independent. So the thing is that, like Leah also said in the beginning, the various stakeholders that all work together are actually the thing that characterize our national urban policy. And I think they also stand for the quality that we have achieved throughout the years. It's been 14 years now. And so I feel like this is something that is also the backbone of it, that we have very committed people from all different levels, this multi-level and also multi-stakeholder approach. Just on the side, I'm also mentioning the structure of it. We have a board which is elected for 3 years, and we have 40 members coming from all different types of institutions, associations, ranging from environmental organizations to, of course, different representatives from city associations and so on. And then we also additionally have a working group where different representatives also work on issues that are important, so that we are always aware of, okay, where is society heading? What are the current challenges in cities, in the neighborhoods? And so we can actually discuss this across levels and disciplines. Moving forward, the national urban policy is comprised of 3 pillars. Well, in this graph, not necessarily pillars, because it explains quite well how they are interlinked. So I'm gonna start in the bottom left corner. This is our so-called project series for cities and urbanity. That's where we have the pilot projects that I will shortly introduce later, and also present 2 examples. It's an instrument that we use to fund innovative ideas, innovative projects based on project calls on average every 2 years. For example, at the moment, in 2020, we had the call on the post-corona city, which we will also discuss later, and a lot of other different topics related to things like social inequality, integration of refugees and migrants, then also having things like the common good in the spotlight and so on. But I think we will talk a bit more about that later. Then additionally, we have our so-called platform, something I'll also mention later, that we use for exchange and also the transfer of knowledge. These 2 together also are instruments that we use at the same time to, redraft and redesign planning laws. These are things that have a big impact on the 3rd pillar, which we call good practice. This is where our planning laws are located. We also have a dedicated urban development law, which is responsible for the urban development assistance programs or support programs. You can just use them, you can use both terms, assistance or support programs. Sometimes we just use both. And of course, also research. So, and as you can see, in most of these, all the different levels are obviously part of the discussion, part of the debate, and also very important stakeholders, except for obviously the pilot projects. They are, put in a real setting, real life setting within the municipalities. Moving on to the good practice in detail. As I said, we have the planning laws, and then also this very specific urban development law. We have the assistance programs or support programs, and also university research, all going hand in hand together. And the thing about that is that we have actually restructured this whole system. Thing is that it was introduced in 1971 with this specific urban development law. And now we're celebrating the 50th anniversary, so we also have some upcoming events this year. We also had a few in the past already to celebrate this, and throughout the decades this whole the programs have been redesigned and reinvented. And in 2020 we made all of these different funding programs a bit more not simple necessarily, but we said, okay, it's actually better to have 3 overall programs, which makes it easier to understand and also to work in an interdisciplinary setting. And the great thing about that is that we have these 3 programs now, which I think is also, like Leah mentioned, buzzwords that you use to communicate about it. So it makes it also a lot easier to communicate about the programs. And the one that is specifically targeting issues around social inequality is the program about social cohesion, which receives 200 million euros from the federal government. And the programs always, give well, 1/3 comes from the federal government, 1/3 from the state governments, and then 1/3 from the local governments, from the municipalities. So in total accounting for 600 million euros. But I've gained quite a lot of experience working in projects and also a very big setting, the International Building Exhibition in Hamburg, for quite a few years. And we also received some funds from that. And I can tell you that it also attracts a lot of investment beyond, state or federal, local funds. So also from private investors, corporations, and so on. So this is something that always triggers a lot more investment, and it's quite interesting to see. Being on that platform for exchange and transfer of knowledge, we have by now all different kinds of formats. Many of you may be familiar with our annual Federal Congress on our national urban policy, the one this year in Cologne, for example. It was also a digital event where we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the urban development support programs. We also have university days. We have a lot of publications and different working group meetings. So all sorts of things to use, to exchange knowledge, to transfer knowledge, because it's not just a thing that we do, from my point of view, there's this sentence, do good and talk about it, and that's all it takes. And that's something where we bring together people not only from Germany and Europe, but also from the whole world to discuss all kinds of issues related to urban development. Moving on to our project series for cities, the pilot projects have been funded since 2007, and we started calls on, in the beginning it was calls on much broader issues related to urban development, and nowadays the calls, for example, from 2018, 2020 actually have much more concrete goals and objectives. And we always receive, a lot of applications, and apart from the overall idea, the overall subject, the criteria for the projects to be funded is that they are both innovative, cooperative, and that they can also be transferred to other places. And in this map, you can also see the different places across Germany, the cities, municipalities, but also regions that have been part of this, and they have all fed into our national urban policy and also the planning laws, and yeah, and there are quite a lot of interesting ones today. The thing is that now we actually want to discuss, what this all has to do with the just dimension, as mentioned also in the new Leipzig Charter. So basically the pilot projects, they stand for that in many ways, because they always address current social issues, challenges, and also needs of cities, obviously, as we decide jointly, what we start a call for. And the overall goal is also to have inclusive cities, inclusive places where nobody feels left out and where everybody gets the opportunity to take part in urban society. The applications are then also processed and evaluated by a jury, and they obviously focus on the innovative character of it, but also the potential benefits that it can have for social cohesion. So this the projects on the one hand, and then I'm also going to focus specifically on our urban development support program related to social cohesion. That's the new program, but the former one was called Social City, which is why I named both. And the Social City program was launched in 1999. This program also addresses obviously social issues, especially social polarization within cities. It aims to improve the living and working conditions for everybody, and has all different kinds of tools. In the beginning, it was mostly about, well, actually it is supposed to be about something related to construction, but at the same time, all of these programs now also have a so-called community manager and all different kinds of social activities and institutions, and they all use the neighborhood as the operational level. So they will all have a community manager in this respective neighborhood. On top of that, it's also very crucial that it follows a holistic approach, all of the projects that are being funded. And at the same time, it's not just, we don't have this understanding where it's, planners or community manager coming in saying, okay, this is what we need to do. It's more about getting everybody on board, the entire urban population. So I remember from my job in Hamburg, for example, it was a huge area comprised of, 40 hectares or something, one of the biggest populated river islands in the world. And so this whole area is populated by people with backgrounds all over the world. And in order to, improve certain, disadvantages, and also to work on improving it without actually, saying, okay, that we're gentrifying this neighborhood, we say that it's crucial to always have, the citizens on board. And this is also why, for example, we had teams of people who spoke 9 languages, and only then we could actually also reach out to everybody on this island, just to give you one example. And then in 2020, when we reshaped the whole urban support programs, it's now called Social Cohesion Program, additionally focuses on climate action, because this is also a major issue. Climate action and social equality are very much interlinked. All right, so let's now move on to our projects. I've got 2 wonderful examples from our call in 2018, which was also by finding new models for common good focused neighborhood development. So this is something where we already put the common good at the core of our projects. So the first question is, of course, how do you actually define the common good, which is a very complex term. It's a very value-based term, so not necessarily easy to grasp immediately. So how will people actually define it? And also, how can we use the dynamic ideas and the commitment of citizens to enrich the neighborhoods? And then also, of course, because in many cases, it's still very much top down. We do have bottom-up initiatives and bottom-up approaches, but at the same time, we're also questioning the role of the municipality and the technicians, the planners. What role can they actually play? We then selected 4 neighborhoods across Germany, ranging from smaller cities like Altenburg to bigger ones like Hanover. They're still ongoing and going to end this year, which is why I think it's very interesting to already now have a look at what they've actually achieved, what they have done. And I've selected two projects. The one is in Hanover and the other one in Münster. So Hanover is the state capital of Lower Saxony. And I used to live in Hanover for quite a few years before I moved to Berlin to work at the ministry. So I'm quite familiar with the project itself. And what's pretty interesting is that Hanover has had many different initiatives dealing with social issues, dealing with their direct living environment, urban planning, and very creative initiatives. And the project called the Society of Extraordinary Cooperation brings a lot of these initiatives together to jointly work on solutions. So the same thing that we do with the National Urban Policy is the same spirit here, bringing everybody together, bringing different people in with different backgrounds, and to then design jointly, for example, public spaces, and also to engage citizens. They have a huge list of tools. I'm just going to mention two of them. You can also see them in the picture. The one is this mobile unit called Raumwagen, and it has many different purposes, as you can see in these different boxes in this picture. And it uses, you can have, you can use it as a stage, you can use it as a cafe, you can use it as a place that has all different kinds of tools, and everybody can borrow it, everybody shares these tools. And also they have introduced an app, so you can also share the different resources you have, which is also something when you look at, environmental issues, also a great thing. It's better to share than to own. The last one is about the Hansa Forum in Münster. It's in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's, biggest city of around 300,000 inhabitants, a lot of students. And this neighborhood, the Hansa neighborhood of Münster, is characterized by, a huge range of different people, different social groups. It's a very diverse and mixed neighborhood. And in this neighborhood, they want to also design new forms of customized participation for all these different groups. And at the same time, then establish something that is really something institutionalized that can also help foster this co-creational process, bringing people together, and then also giving them the opportunity to select projects that will then also be implemented. And they have the so-called Hansa Convent, where they choose like on a randomized basis, so just statistically, to have a real representation of people who will then in this institution, this convent or board, whatever you want to call it, to decide which projects will actually be implemented in the neighborhood, which is something that's very extraordinary. And on top of that, which I think is very outstanding, is that they also have developed a so-called neighborhood common good index, which I think is very important to mention, because the common good is not something that's completely universal. It's more or less something that needs to be defined at the specific local level as well, because in order to achieve social cohesion, it's not the same everywhere. So we need to have this place-based approach, as also mentioned in the new Leipzig Charter. And with that being said, I'd like to say thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
We do too, Dominique. Thank you very much. I already have noted a few things and great notions. I mean, they must, it makes sense that they come from local projects, because they're quite innovative, such as the Society of Extraordinary Cooperation, or also such a thing as developing a local common good index. I mean, that is very, very fascinating. And I think we should try and dig deeper into these project results, but also, of course, the broader lines behind the just dimension of the German national urban development policy. Thank you very much, Dominique. And I would actually like to pass on the mic to Slovenia, to Blanka Bartol and Tomaž Miglavčič of the Slovene Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning. They're at the construction and at the Spatial Planning, Construction and Housing Directorate. So I think they are the right people to consult when it comes to understanding Slovenia's urban development policy, because it has a lot to do with the spatial planning in Slovenia. That is the one thing I can already tell you. So Blanka and Tomaž, if you would like to start sharing your screen, we'll be grateful. Yeah.
Share. Can you see it?
Yes, it's great. If you just go to full screen.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, you are right. We prepared the presentation, but I will explain it in a few minutes, while Tomaž will also collaborate in the discussion with us. So maybe some questions could be also answered by him. I would like to go further with short presentation of our urban policy. I shall say that policy in our country, and as you said already at the beginning, it depends on the institutional setting. And in our case, our urban policy is integral part of a spatial development policy. And the major document we choose to present a little, in short, here are a strategic spatial development document, the national spatial policy called Spatial Development Strategy of Slovenia from 2004. And the national housing program, the second one, the last one, the valid one, for 2015 until 2025. This in the field we are presenting today, just dimension, to our opinion, is are two major documents that address this dimension. Otherwise, just green and productive, we believe that this is intertwined. It's connected one with another. So the very sharp cut cannot be done among them very efficiently. As regards the urban policy scope, as said, national level, we address the urban policy in our ministry, but of course addressing the national document and the documents are in a way integrated documents. That means that our the sector ministries are also collaborated in developing it, the documents, and of course they also have a responsibility to implement them through their measures. When we come to the regional level, we address the regional policy by, in a way, by regional development agencies who are preparing regional development programs, while we don't have an administrative level on regional development, at regional level, but we are trying, according to the new law, spatial planning law, reintroducing a spatial planning, which is for urban policy very important, intermediate level between national and local, where the objectives and the measures can be together with the regional stakeholders can be more easily defined. As we come to the local level, the municipalities are responsible for spatial and land use planning. And so they are also responsible for urban policy on local level. So now we have quite interesting situation, but of course we have to from the national documents, they have to be in line with the spatial development strategy and other documents which are addressing these issues. How we understand a just dimension within the spatial development strategy, we are promoting three policy, I would say, in broader terms, objectives. One is polycentric settlement structure, where urban nodes are understanding and are functioning as economic and service hubs, allowing for access for people and, of course, other stakeholders to those services. We also, through this, promote. We also promote the second policy, broader policy objective is cohesion. So cohesion that supports regional development with particular attention. We are paying also to the areas that are different, of course, from the urban, like peripheral border or mountain areas that also need special attention. And the third policy objective, which is quality of life in all types of areas, no matter whether they are urban or rural, but of course adjusted to their specific needs. That means quality of life in urban areas might mean something different than in rural areas and so on. But it should be taken account the specificity, this diversity, territorial diversity. And this also within this, we are ensuring accessibility to services and green spaces, and improvement of quality of living conditions, which are, I mean, necessary to work on them in different types of areas. As regards the National Housing Program 2015-2025, the program is, through the program, we are establishing conditions for implementing all citizens' constitutional right of choice in addressing their housing needs, providing opportunities for everyone to integrate in society, and focusing also on housing, I mean, with housing also targeting specific vulnerable groups. So this is in terms of inclusion and opportunities, as in terms of equal opportunities in the field of access to housing. If I go a little bit maybe more to spatial development strategy, I shall, the document that has been adopted in the Parliament in 2004 has been updated. It's not, the procedure is not finished yet, but nevertheless, the document from 2004, which is still valid, and the new one, both of them are promoting polycentric urban system as a basic settlement backbone, through which we provide a fair access to jobs and services, public infrastructure, and mobility services. But on top of this, one of the important elements is also green infrastructure, which is, or could be a part of green, I shall say, but nevertheless, the access to ecosystem services, and also to its purpose to link urban and rural areas is also same important for just dimension in the cities as housing, for example. But there also accent on local centers, which are mainly small-sized cities, which have their main role is providing access to services such as healthcare, education, information, public and social services, but also in this relation securing future for all places, as is promoted also by territorial agenda, and that's our framework, EU framework documents. this is a map from the Spatial Development Strategy from 2004, showing the distribution, I would say, of a polycentric urban development system. Although it seems that maybe it's not even distributed, but we must see that there are certain parts of Slovenia which are mountainous, and so you cannot have. I mean, but you should believe me that the access to those services supported by the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure and services provide together with the services. In these centers, the adequate access to the people living there and in the surrounding areas. So the new document is promoting more this integrated approach, integrating urban, transport and green together, also linking, as I said, urban and rural, but also providing, I mean, the quality of living environment in the cities. So not only the access to green spaces, but also the other dimension from this. I would like to mention the Housing Fund, which is our main program based on the housing law and supporting by the Housing Fund, housing program. So those three, how to say, policy instruments, and have been there from the year 2000, and as for the first housing fund, we could in the first housing program we could say that it was believed at that time that that making more housing, I mean that providing housing would for the market would decrease the prices and so enable people to have easier access to housing. But unfortunately this turned to be this turned not to solve all the questions with housing. So in the next housing program which is now operating now, we could say that implementation is more aligned with the urban policy, and I would like to spot one of the issues why we are saying so, namely this program takes into account the priority areas for housing provisions where the most needs are. That means we are not supporting the housing wherever there is an interest, but where the needs are. So, and these are mainly in urban centers. And in this way, the housing program is supporting also the national spatial development and urban policy. The program also offers more public rental housing, and thus enabling people to solve their housing needs in a different lifetime, different time. I mean, when they have a young family and when they get older, they have a different needs. So with rental housing, this change of housing is more enabled, and thus we are supporting also housing mobility, which is one of the also one of the objective of the national policy, to support the mobility, not to concentrate. I mean, to go that the people are moving also, and not attached so much to their owned houses or housing. We also have municipal housing funds in bigger cities, which are supported also by National Housing Fund in implementing their housing policy at local level. But there could also be not only in bigger cities, but also in small municipalities. I mean, smaller municipalities. You could also, there's also housing programs that are more part of the local budgets and are supporting and trying to solve the housing problems in those municipalities wherever it comes to these questions. I have here two small cases, one from the National Housing Program. It's a pilot project on supporting on development rental dwelling for young people in Ljubljana in order to support their early independent, becoming independent from their family. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And is still in construction phase, but is in a final stage. So, and one of such is also there are two such pilot projects, and we are looking forward to see how this can be supporting this objectives of I mean, young people to come to their independence early enough. The other one is a little bit different. It takes on board the specific problems in neighborhood of Planina that has arose at certain point, and that municipality of city municipality of Kranj established after that a renewal office where a joint work with people who are also the users of these places were collected, and they worked jointly on the list of activities and also on joint implementation. Of course, this type of work gave a specific supports the capacity of the inhabitants to look or to make things better, to improve their living environment in their neighborhood, but also to of course to help municipality to upgrade their abilities, how to lead or how to go on with certain types of renewal and a project like that or similar project in their city municipality. We also support, we don't have so extensive programs on urban development as in Germany, but we also support networks and other projects in order to exchange, to learn from each other and to exchange. One of such is Network for Space. I mean, the English translation might not be the right one, but it's a network for space in the cities, which connects different NGOs who deal with different urban topics and work with people on the ground. I mean, this is the field that ministry or any public administration sometimes has very difficulties to reach. So the NGOs work is here very much supporting our endeavors to promote to come to people to see what their needs are. I mean, ministries and cannot can easily support such works through supporting such networks or projects and so on. And there are two cases I would like to share, and the other case which we support, the other project is Cities to Cities, where we would like to show not only foreign cases when people sometimes say, oh, we know this can be done in Germany, but we are not sure for Slovenia. But it's not true. It's within Slovenia we already have many good projects which are not known to other cities. So it is important to show that this is also what can be done, what has been done, and so sharing such information and learning from each other and the national framing is also very important. So these three small projects. One is Leblanc Hotspots, where people were using mobile phones to report on hotspots, really hot, I mean, unbearable places for walking and for living or for being there. So on the basis of this information, the map was produced and also the improvements were suggested for each of these places, how the municipality, in this case, the city municipality of Ljubljana, could implement better solutions, the solutions that are livable, that are important for people, for all kinds of people. I mean, all different needs, from young to old, from different social groups, and of course, this is an important information also for the city municipality when they will provide or they will plan certain investments. They could, of course, take these suggestions into account. And in some cases, just small intervention can be done also, not major project, renewable projects. The other one is courtyards to people, where in the cities we have a lot of courtyards that are abandoned or misused or whatever, and in not a good condition. And this initiative was took by association House Hisha, and it's going on for some years. And in the list of courtyards have been prepared a discussion on what can be done with them, how then can be how to say, used by people in the city, what has to be done, and so on. And they also have a small award, top courtyard in Maribor, for this, in this case, for 2020. City to Cities is the third edition, and there was a project included from transferring an unused public bus to mobile youth center, then on a youth initiative, and that can move all around the city and gather, provide a meeting place and also interaction among people, young people, and also in the neighborhoods. So these are three small projects that are important for not very demanding in terms of financial resources, but very good for mobilizing people, and that they can do something, which is very important also in terms of urban policy. What I can do, what can be done how can be active in an urban place like Ljubljana or other cities. As in terms of governance, we are, as the most promising activities and actions, we think that our territorial dialogue with cities performed through urban forums, which have been organized from 2015. This year it was the 6th time, and which engage both political and expert levels. We think that urban issues has to have political visibility also, and importance of, that politicians how to say, understand the urban problems, and that they know how to act in this, how to say, elements. There are not only mayors, of course, we address mainly mayors are participating of the city municipalities, but it is important also that other politicians could understand what urban policy may offer also for the development of the whole country. Then we have a national support, as already mentioned, to capacity building, exchange of experiences and networking. I showed some examples, and we also collaborate with cities and municipalities association in terms how to communicate urban policy and how to support the capacity building. I mentioned already reintroduction of regional spatial plans, which are through which we can also provide a good ground for developing functional urban areas, which is a novelty in it's not really a novelty because we already have them in spatial development strategy from 2004, but it is this time the national the spatial planning law allows us to put a certain ground in this field to develop reconcile the urban spatial development and measures within functional urban areas, which is something we are looking forward how to do this better. And then green system, as I already mentioned, which are also although they are green, they are just also, and we are practicing this in all kinds of settlements. And now by the law, they are also introducing at the regional level. And by reintroducing the regional spatial plan, we are looking for also to reintroducing green regional systems. What is most challenging? I mean, of course, on one hand, there are insufficient resources, but not only always financial. They can also be in terms of human resources, lack of human resources, and allocating also sufficient time for collaboration on developing urban measures. It's not, I mean, it takes time, and we all know that developing policies and developing measures takes time, and sometimes there's not enough patience to do this. And although we have an integrated policy, we still see that some challenges in following the urban dimension or taking into account urban dimension in other policies. When it comes to the financial resources, they are likely to describe urban in their own terms, not following the spatial development strategy. So that's still challenging. Okay, I will finish here, and of course, looking forward to answering the questions.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you so much. You managed to take us to Slovenia, I must say, and give us a really good impression, I think, of what urban development and spatial development policy in Slovenia means. And I think especially on this aspect of mobilization, of participation, and of creating a platform. And here again, I think this is also what already came up in Dominique's presentation. That's one of the most important functions that national urban policies, whatever their exact form or shape, can fulfill, creating a platform and something like a shared direction for even the smallest initiatives to do something that can make a difference on the ground. So I really liked these examples, and I see we also received quite a few questions already in the Q&A section. I would like to encourage everyone to add to that, to take a look at it. The panelists themselves, they can answer in this Q&A box if you want to do that. This way you can directly reply to the question, but we otherwise would also, of course, take up these questions later on in the discussion. Having said that, the discussion is for later. I think we do all deserve a very short break just to get away from screens. It doesn't matter that we're a bit behind because we have time until 4 all in all to hear France's presentation and to have what I think will be a very interesting discussion with all of you. So thank you for that. I suggest we reconvene at 14:45 our time, which is in 7 minutes, just to shake it off briefly, get away from the screen. And in the meantime, I would like to ask my colleague to share a screen. Exactly, thank you very much, which draws your attention to two things. One is a QR code, and that is an invitation to join us for an informal coffee walk-in moment, especially for those who don't know the EUKN. Just imagine, we are in something like a virtual conference here, but we don't have a coffee table. We don't have these breaks where we would usually just chat and exchange. So if you want to do that together with us, you're warmly invited to do that. Scan the QR code or follow the link that has just been pasted in the chat. And the other is indeed to remind us all that we're here in a series and in a week of national urban policy discussions. We have the productive and the green dimension coming up as well tomorrow. But for the moment, I'll leave you a very short break. Please come back in 5 minutes and then we'll resume. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. I hope people are reconnecting. I hope you got some fresh air or a sip of coffee or whatever you needed at this point during today. I also see Sabrina back. That's wonderful. I will then simply start introducing you and you can already start sharing your presentation if you want. So indeed, now we're moving to the last National Urban Policy presentation of today, and that is also a special one because it is the one of the EUKN's chair, Sabrina Abdi. She's not only that, she is also Director for Housing, Mobility and Security at the French Agence Nationale de la Cohésion des Territoires, ANCT. And we're really pleased to have you presenting one of the best known NUPs, I think, in, as far as I'm concerned, the Politique de la Ville in France. Sabrina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Leah. Hi to everyone. To start, sorry. Okay. So the Politique de la Ville, which is can be translated as urban policy for priority districts or deprived neighborhood, it depends, has took its first steps 40 years ago and has evolved during those years with a different generation of law, from a renewal approach to a more integrated approach with a social dimension and a participatory approach. It has also evolved due to the social situation and riots in those districts at the beginning of the 80s and also the beginning of the 2000. So it is based on statistical aspects and the characterization of urban poverty. And those data allow us to define a geography of Quartier Politique de la Ville. So the acronym is QPV, which is the priority district. We use data based on the poverty to define those areas. So regarding those statistics, we have 1,050 QPV representing 5.4 million of inhabitants, which is 8% of the French population. This policy is also an interministerial policy. I mean, at the national level, we have interministerial cooperation to mobilize sectoral policy to target poverty, improving living condition, employment, for example, in those districts. But we have also a specific budget to enhance the national sectoral policy, like 500 billion euros to finance big ONG or local ONG or specific action at the local level. There is the intergovernmental cooperation, but there is also at the local level, there is the state which is represented in each department and is also in charge of animating and having this coordination with other stakeholders. So at the local level, as I say, there is a multi-partnership approach, which is translated via a city contract. And this contract is signed at the intermunicipality level and involve the local state, but also other stakeholders. And the city contract can represent different districts. So this is the map of the Politique de la Ville with all the neighborhoods. There is a big concentration in Île-de-France, which is Paris region, which is well known because of this really contrast of poverty and the opposite. And there is also the other island, overseas island, which concentrate a lot of poverty. We have a national observatory of politique de la ville, which is really dedicated to deliver data regarding politique de la ville for employment, social measures, women equality, gender equality, and so on, to also feed the politics in terms of data and see how it is evolving. So we published every year a report, and sometimes I think it's in English, so maybe I can send you also the link. So to achieve this integrated approach and to foster fair and balanced urban developments, the city contract is the base, and it supports also integration between this social and urban development. Each city contract have three main pillars: social cohesion to support NGOs working on the fields, social leisures and activities, childcare and healthcare, and action to reduce poverty. The second pillar is the living condition and urban renewal. So it is concentrating on urban renewal projects, improvement of public services, housing quality, and creation of equipment in the neighborhood. The third pillar is employment and economic development. And it is regarding the rates of unemployment and school dropping in those territories. There is some action to make those areas more attractive via, for example, tax measures, reinforcement of employment services, and to be closer to the citizens and to the inhabitants of those territories, and also action to improve and to support entrepreneurship in those districts. So the link with the new Leipzig Charter is really no one left behind. And the understanding in France is really the equal access. I mean, strengthening focuses on housing of quality, education of quality, having the same access and chances regarding education, and also social cohesion as a whole. The advancement of the just city dimension, we are focusing on not only on what to do, but for whom and the how. So the city contract is really the base, gathering together all the stakeholders that have interest in those areas. So it is really and it evolves, and every year to have new actions and to program new actions or new projects regarding the city contract. One thing which is really important and had been reinforced with the law of 2014 is the support of citizens' participation. So we settled citizens' council at the level of a district to gather together citizens with the local states and also municipality administration. Regarding the renewal urban project, so I will talk about later, there is the creation of house of projects. So this means that at the level of the district, there is houses where inhabitants can discuss about the project, give their opinions, and exchange between them, because as you know, those projects take a long time to be implemented. So there is a real transformation of the district. At the national level also, we launched a national platform last year. It is like a social network to share knowledge, to have access to information, such as call for projects. And it is really for gathering actors and level to create networking, sharing of experience, and having access to all the information that we can gather at the national level, but also the regional and the local level. So it gathered the local states, the municipalities, the NGO, other people working in other ministries. So it's really a new form to discuss and exchange between all these actors involved in the politique de la ville. So the governance, as I said, there is a governance at local level. Yes, at local level. I will speak maybe during the discussion about the governance at the national level. So via the city contract, there is three different bodies of allowing the governance. So it gathers always the representative of the stakeholders, but it's co-chaired by the local states and the intermunicipality organization and the municipality also concerned. So the technical committee prepared the steering committee. The steering committee evaluate and monitor and validate all the steps of the life of the city contract. And then there is also thematic working group for in social cohesion, it can be urban renewal, and they gather together the stakeholders involved in the thematic, and they can also share information and speak about more transversal topics such as fighting against discrimination or equality, gender equality. So this is the local governance. Regarding the post-COVID recovery, those districts were really strongly hit by the pandemic situation. Higher rates of COVID or mortality were in those areas. For example, in Saint-Denis, which is the poorest department and concentrating a lot of quartier politique de la ville, district, priority district, it was really, it has light, in fact, the disparity, the social disparity, people living in the same, more people living in the same apartment, for example, people living, working in services. So there were no remote work for them. So they were more exposed to the COVID. So there were a national plan, but then there were at the beginning of the year, so at the end of January, a CIV, so it is a Comité interministériel des villes, which is an interministerial committee for city. So it was under the Prime Minister organization, and we defined 5 priority areas where we can strengthen existing actions, such as housing and living environment. For example, there is the renewal, urban renewal program, and we added 2 billion at this program to have more projects. Employment, for example, it's about strengthening the local governance regarding employment by the creation of so-called Cité de l'Emploi, which is a place where all the public services regarding employment, training, education are gathered together, education and early childhood, social and territorial cohesion, and safety and delinquency protection. So the CIV has dedicated a specific budget of 3.3 billion euros for those districts and for all these priority areas. We also last year during the pandemic launched a specific action which is called Quartier d'été. It's summer district, because young people were not able to leave the district during the situation of pandemic, after pandemic, during summer. So we have dedicated actions to give a break for young people who are living in these areas. Some examples of implementations. So there is the National Agency of Renewal, Urban Renewal. So there is a specific program, it's a specific agency, and they have a dedicated budget of 10 billion euros plus 2 billion euros after the CIV in January this year. It's to accelerate projects, to reinforce some projects of equipment, schools, housing quality, and some figures. For example, there is only 4,000 districts that are in this program at the national level. And we are in the phase of validation of the project. So some projects are already implemented, but it took a long time. So there is validated 8,000 public equipment, 300 school, for example, construction of social housing, refurbishment of housing too. And for this renewal agency, we have a specific local governance with the local states, the municipality, and the chief of the project. And also at the national level, we validate the projects city by city every weeks, almost in this period. Another implementation example is it's the Cité Éducative. So it is really focused on child from 0 to their integration, professional integration. So it's really a way to support young from the beginning till they are at higher school or something like that, and really to give them and allow them to have the chances to be able to integrate the school and the universities. So it has been launched 3 years ago, and during the pandemic, it was really interesting to see that it was really a place where we can bring emergency solutions. For example, delivery PC, laptop to children to continue to follow schools, help families with food emergency, etc. So there is 126 Cités Éducatives in France, and gathering at the local level all the stakeholders that may be involved, like SMEs, school, universities, local services, and each Cité Éducative has its own specificity. For example, music at schools, or food, or urban renewal, or something like that. So it's really interesting, and so that's why after the pandemic, and the CIV has decided to strengthening this kind of project to deliver not for all deprived priority district, but to a lot of them some solution regarding the education. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. That was great, and actually very pertinent now that we're moving to the discussion round with our first round of discussion. And this is about, certainly you picked up on it, COVID and how the COVID pandemic has impacted urban areas, but more specifically, ways in which the national urban policies can help spur a recovery and a just recovery in cities. So you picked up on this, Sabrina, some of the ways forward, the recreation of the CIV, of this inter-ministerial committee. And I was just wondering, what is the role of this, if you can give a little more detail about that in the recovery process, and how will it be used to ensure that people don't fall through the cracks like they, has happened in all urban spaces throughout the world. And we've uncovered the polarization in cities because of COVID, which we always knew. But I'm wondering what this body, what role it can play in helping this.
Okay, so this board, which is a ministerial board, and every ministry is involved in those meetings. So there is obviously different level. There is the ministerial level, and it can be also presided, held by the president. So it has been relaunched because since 2013, there were no CIV just before the law of 2014. So it was really an emergency situation, if I may say. And the plan is that they select actions where we can be really focusing the actions. For example, there is also, regarding security, the nomination of new districts. I don't know how can I translate it, the reconquête républicaine, which is, because there is a lack of proximity, I mean, with the common value, or I don't know how to translate it. So there is some specific actions regarding, as I say, cité éducative, but also really childhood, healthcare, renewal, and they monitor these actions. So they reunited every 3 months to see where we are. So then obviously there is the administration which gather together to monitor also those actions. And we, at our level, at the agency, we are also here to provide engineering for districts that have issues, but not the resources, for example, human resources, to make some projects. So that's the role of this CIV, is to monitor and evaluate the actions.
Excellent. Thank you. And Dominique, I'd like to pose a question to you. You spoke about the post-corona city projects that you were launching and how it's funded. Can you share a little bit about how this idea was born? What do you expect out of these projects? How they can help advance inclusion in cities in Germany?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sena. Indeed, we launched this project called last year in the midst of the corona pandemic. And as many of you know, we were in the middle of drafting the new Leipzig Charter, and we had already made a lot of progress, and it was adopted at the end of November last year. And so we were hit by corona, and we were all saying, okay, now what are we going to do? And because the new Leipzig Charter ultimately responds to all different kinds of challenges, but what about a pandemic? And so as you can imagine, we met by a lot of people who wondered the same question, like how can we actually respond to that? Do we need to completely change a lot of the things that we mentioned in the new Leipzig Charter? It turned out in the end that a lot of the things that we address in the document can also be applied to pandemics, obviously, but still the consequences, also like Sabrina said earlier about the most vulnerable neighborhoods in particular, but also the others, the city centers, and then also the whole, work-life balance, the work environment, then obviously public spaces. A lot of things have changed dramatically, like for example, now that we're all sitting at home and doing this meeting, not in person. And this is something that will most likely fundamentally change the conception of what urban life is like. Berlin, for example, lost inhabitants for the first time in more than 10 years last year. And as many of you know, it attracts people from everywhere. So that was quite impressive. So more people moved to the suburbs or rural areas where they could work as well. So ultimately, all of these debates that we had, it was also big on the media, have triggered this. And we said, okay, now we are in the year of having a new project call. So what will it be? And ultimately we said, yeah, well, it cannot be something other than Corona. And this is like the most pressing issue. And it will also be there, not hopefully the virus itself, but the consequences will be there for the various years to come. And so we need to address this. And so what we did is in this call for projects, we decided to pick actually 3 fields of action. The first one is about so-called solidary neighborhoods and economies. The second one is about public spaces, mobility, and also urban structures. And the last one is about urban development strategies, particularly related to resilience, which is something that we also added to the new Leipzig Charter as a consequence of the pandemic. And so we have selected 13 very innovative projects, and they're ranging from things like pop-up concerts for retail areas, public spaces. How can we rethink, the way that, cities actually work? Also starting new low threshold corporations, also with initiatives like Fridays for Future, for example. And they all test this in a real setting. So I'm very excited about that. And so what do we expect from them? Well, first of all, as usual, we expect them to come up with new ideas, new solutions of how you can address this. And I'm personally involved in 2 of the projects, and they started literally, I think 2 weeks ago or so. So there are no results yet, but very excited, and feel like this is something that also this tool that we have with the pilot projects, that we can easily respond to new challenges, and so that we're always, at the forefront of, responding to this.
Thanks, Dominique. And just one last question, actually, something that you said reminded me of what Blanca and Tomas shared about Slovenia, and in particular, this is for Blanca, for the Slovenian case. Public sector innovation has been, I guess, spurred a lot in the COVID pandemic response in cities. And you shared a few projects, one, the Hotspot, and the Youth Mobility Project. And I'm wondering, also Dominica spoke about the urban and rural continuum, and you spoke about the spatial development aspects and this continuum between not only looking at urban space, but how it impacts rural. And I'm wondering how, if there are any projects related to the COVID recovery, that the NEP can help in making this relationship or the continuum work better between urban and rural spaces that you're seeing in Slovenia? Any more projects like the Hotspot project that you are generating that's innovative and you'd like to share?
I will. Sorry. Tomasz will react. Yeah.
Okay, I will react on this. Yeah, well, this what was actually said about this, let's say, rural-urban dimension or a relationship, and the movement of people from, let's say, urban areas now in the COVID situation to the rural areas also happen in Slovenia to a certain extent. Although this is not something that we didn't know from the past, because for Slovenia it's a very typical situation that mostly because of the real estate prices that are very, very high in the cities, and the kind of a, let's say, general understanding that the life in the countryside now it's much better because there are green areas around and so on, and there are better let's say possibilities for raise children and to recreate in the natural environment and so on. So there's this general notion that the quality of life in the rural areas is higher. We are facing these urbanization trends for decades in Slovenia. So basically, our cities never really grew to the pace of the surrounding areas. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of let's say remote countryside that also has its problem, but I'm talking about these areas around the bigger cities. This situation now even was, let's say, the trend fastened up now during the COVID, and we know that even some demographic data says that, but also if you like follow what's going on in the real estate market, for example, at the moment the prices of the houses that are with the garden and so on in the vicinity of the cities actually increased. So we can actually see this that also due to COVID, probably people now are even more willing to move to the countryside than they were before. But we have a problem with that, especially as we are also dealing not only with urban policies, also with spatial planning. That is causing all sorts of problems. This is for sure it's unsustainable, let's say, model of development. We have huge problems with the daily commuting and so on, and that's why actually our idea all the time is to improve actually the quality of life in the cities. I think that the quality of life in the cities, of course, has in a certain way it's higher. For example, the access of services usually it's much better, especially if you're talking on this proximity of services. But yeah, there's sometimes there's a problem. There's a problem on the housing market. We have a huge, I'd say, we have a big crisis in the housing. But also, I think the same thing in many European cities. There is a problem that in some areas there is a lack of accessibility to green areas. There's the problem of the heat in the city centers. It's something that we are actually experiencing these days now, because we are in the middle of the very, very big heat wave here in Slovenia in the moment, and we are actually seeing that, and all that are certain elements that let's say that even that makes people believe that the life in the countryside is better than the life in the cities. Another issue that I have to highlight, with this notion of quality of life cities, it's the improvement of public spaces. It's also something that is very important, that we invest a lot into public spaces. That's something that was done in Slovenia and many Slovenian cities in the last decades. The public space, especially in the historical centers, was much improved, but a lot was invested into infrastructure. A bit less was invested into services. It is also linked very much to the very, very fast development of tourism, that again has the positive effects on one side, on the economy, on the life condition, and also has a negative effects, on the other side, like the increase of the real estate prices, gentrification of city centers, you know, and also the cities that that saw this very fast tourist development in the last years now, I believe, are going to face a huge economic crisis because of, I think that the real effects of the COVID are coming, you know, especially in the field of tourism, because now during the pandemic, many companies were basically kept alive artificially, you know, with all sorts of public subsidies and so on. But now when these subsidies are going to go away, I think that we'll face also some problems in the field of economy and the increase of the unemployment and so on. So I think that there are very challenging times that are ahead of us.
Thanks. Definitely great examples of the public space, the use of public space, the acceleration of trends that were happening already in some of the cities, the having to like rebuild a body or activate a body that once was to help with the recovery process, and then using pop-ups and maybe temporary solutions or things that correspond with the changing times, so that, you know, you don't have this hard infrastructure, something that's more agile in ways to help the COVID recovery. That's great, thank you. And now I give the floor to Leah to take over the discussion.
Sure, thank you. I would like to go back to a question that I saw only for a couple of seconds in the Q&A section. And I believe that I thought, oh, this is a very interesting question. And Sabrina then clicked the button that she would answer it live, which makes the question disappear. It's no problem at all. But well, Sabrina, I think you also remember the question, which came from Frédéric Christophe from Luxembourg, and maybe you can answer it again, so everyone can hear your answer. And I would like to add one addition to this, namely on these priority districts, the more than 1,500 you mentioned that are targeted by the French Politique de la Ville. I wonder, this district, this neighborhood approach is very is very telling, and is a strong feature of the French urban policy, right? To what extent is it something you think is like the unique selling point also of the French NUP? And what is it that you see in these priority districts that is a common challenge? And where do you see also diversity and challenges? It's a tricky question, and I'm also interested in the answer to Frédéric's question, but give it a go.
Okay, so I answered in the chat, but above the threshold, there is all the action possible. In fact, we have specific actions for those districts. If I can go a little bit further, this district can be just a street or half a street with another street. So it's really close. And then you have the QP, the Quartier Politique de la Ville, the district, then can cover a little bit more than the street. So Politique de la Ville is a specific and targeted actions for education, renewal, etc. And above with this, there is all the action possible done by other ministries, by regional level, or local authorities. I don't know if it's clear or not. It's a common law. We name it the common law.
Yes, I think surely for Frédéric's question, and the on how these districts differ and what is like their commonality, if any.
So obviously, when you have a district in a rural area, is really different from a district in Guadeloupe, for example, or in Marseille in the south, which is a really big area, metropole. So obviously there is differences between those territories, and the city contract is there also to take into account the differences with the stakeholders if there is a mobility issue, because there is some districts which are in the city center, so they will not have the same issue as another, for example, still in Marseille, in the Quartier Nord, where there is no subway and few buses going to the city center. So they are different. But to give you some key figures to stress that there is a similar situation, there is a similar ground. There is 42 is the poverty rate, when in France it's 3 times more than at the national level. For the young people, there is 3,900% of people having less than 25 years. The situation of school dropping and unemployment, it's 29 against 16 at the national level. So there is a similarity. You will find the same issues: unemployment, women is isolated, education issues, etc., etc. So there is same challenges. And if I can also add something which is really important, and the last election, national election in France for the regional and departmental level that has been held on Sunday, there is a lack of participation also. The inhabitants feel, I don't know if it's illegitimate or whatever, but there is a lack of common value, maybe, or something like that, because there were, for example, in Vaux-en-Velin, near Lyon, only 12% of participation, and it's the same in all areas. So that is one of the challenges, if I may say, for the next years and the common needs.
Yeah, a very strong example, even though one that certainly does not make you very happy. Thank you, Sabrina.
You're welcome.
And I think this links very nicely to another theme we would like to talk about with you. And again, everyone from the audience continues to be invited to send in their questions in the Q&A, pick up on anything the speaker said. But I'd like to go back to this tricky notion of the common good. I think, well, public or civic participation is certainly also something like a common good. But here's already where the definition issue starts, and I think it never ends. Dominique also talked about it, because of course the common good in urban development is something that in Germany is, I think, on quite a high tide currently. Very interesting development. And we know, I can repeat it again, that the new Leipzig Charter is entitled The Transformative Power of Cities for the Common Good. And can you maybe, all of you, in a short reflection, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on this, reflect on what you feel it means for, well, any urban policy or intervention to foster the common good. What would you think is sort of the main thing that establishes this term? And here you're really free, because as we heard, it can mean so different things. Can I maybe first pass the mic to Dominique and then the others?
All right, that's quite difficult for me as a researcher and sociologist to put it into one sentence. But, you know, to keep it more general, the common good is something, it's a value-based concept, which makes it a lot more difficult to grasp. It's something that you can identify, you know, different indicators for, something that we also use to, for example, identify these priority areas in Germany. We have, you know, in-depth analysis. At the same time, I think it is something that can also be the common good, something as an indicator for how do people actually feel in a city. I have a lot of friends who are not urban planners, and when they go to a city, like a new one they've never been to before, like after a day or two, you already get kind of a feeling for it, you know, like what are the characteristics, the features, what makes the city unique. And I feel it's something that we can easily feel, you know, whether or not a city is actually addressing common good, whether, you know, people have opportunities, they're part of society, where people, you know, feel like it's a great place to be, the quality of life is high. Of course, we can use indicators, but it's something that, you know, is very not universal. It's something very specific to every place, every city. And yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, a very diplomatic answer, and a very good one. I think adding a certain emotional part to the common good is something that speaks to me at least a lot, because indeed it's also about how a place feels and what you feel it can do for you, and also what other people in this place can do for you. How about Slovenia? What role does the common goods in urban development play for you?
Yeah, it's similarly difficult as Dominic said. I mean, I can see the objective elements, of course, of this definition that can be defined through some objective elements, as it was said, through certain indicators like access to public spaces or to different services and so on. But on the other side, it has also the subjective elements, which already was mentioned through attachments of spaces. But again, I mean, these two elements are connected one to another. So if we, as Tomáš said earlier, could improve the attractiveness of the cities in order to make them for the people that they would like to live in cities, not to move all the time outside and seek houses there, or housing in the rural areas. That might also be that might also increase their quality of life in terms of subjective how to say, feeling how this quality of life for them personally is improving. But also on the other side, I shall mention the public, common good is for us also the quality of environment. I mean, these environmental characteristics that are connected to open spaces, but not only, it's also how do we create them, what are the, how do we care, maintenance, but also, air quality, all this, how to say, healthy, but also the safety. We are very often in urban areas confronted with some specific natural, man-made or natural hazards that can also be problem for the common good, and they destroy this notion, but also the physical elements of this common good. So there's quite a range, big range of this field. Yeah, I wonder whether Tomáš would like to add something.
Yeah, maybe only one thing for me. It's public good also, it manifests in a way through the sense of belongship to a place. I think that it's very important that we recreate, I'd say, communities, that we create, these social networks of linkages between different people in the cities, and this very often, I think it has to do a lot with the opportunities that are available for different social groups, for different age groups, and so on. And as I said also before, I think it's very important. I think it's the accessibility to all sorts of services, places, jobs, etc. Mobility. I think that all that, in a way, it somehow creates this common good. It's not only one thing, but it's all together. And the final manifestation of that is: do I feel myself to be a part of it? Am I a part of a city or not?
I don't know if Sabrina would like to add anything to this very complete, I think, take on the common good. But please go ahead.
I will add just, no, it has been said in different form, but yeah, it's a place where there is, because it's a politique de la ville also, there is no territorial segregation, and the citizens can access to the entire city, because there is some places when they are not close or whatever, and the services, and when there can be also bridges between communities, as Thomas say in another way, and yeah, facilitating mobility, diversity, and equality between citizens.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I think we can close this round and maybe move on to a topic that has been mentioned before, but I think because it's moving many people a lot, it's worth exploring it again, namely housing. And for that, I'd like to pass the ball again to Sena to introduce this topic.
Yes, the just dimension and housing, we've mentioned it. It really has a connection to building inclusion in cities. Blanca, you mentioned it specifically, the Slovenia housing program, and which has an array of measures around making housing accessible and affordable. And Tomas, you picked up on that too. Looking at the implementation of the program, what measures are most promising and which ones are challenging? You named a few that were particularly innovative, following the life cycle of people, but which do you find most challenging, and which do you find most promising within your housing program?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Blanca has mentioned in her presentation these goals of the housing policy. So it's the accessibility to housing, it's the quality of housing, it's housing mobility. It's also that some specific measures for specific social groups, like for young, for old people, and so on. And so we have a bit of specific housing problem or housing situation that is very much close also to some other South European countries. You have extremely high percentage of the ownership in the housing. For example, you have more than 80% of dwellings that are occupied by the owners, and you have a very low percentage of the rent housing. Only around 10% of dwellings actually are in the renting sector. This is the result of the several things that have happened in the past. One thing is we had a huge privatization of the social housing stock in the 1990s. That was one thing, and the second one is that traditionally, people in Slovenia were actually solving their housing issue, their housing problem by building their own house. So we have also a lot of for someone who'd come from the outside, would say that, wow, we have extremely high housing standard because everyone is like living in its own house, with a lot of room and with a big garden and so on. But on the other side, we are really facing the housing shortages, especially in the cities. But if you wanted to achieve those housing goals, housing policy goals that I have mentioned and Blanca has mentioned, we need to change something quite tremendously in our housing policy. So this last housing program, we actually moved from the policy that was increasing that is giving people a opportunity to build or to let's say buy their own apartment on the market. We went to the situation where we said, no, we want to convert or to solve our housing problems by increasing the building of the social rental housing. And in that direction, in the last few years, something has changed. There are more and more, let's say, these public social houses, these public dwellings coming on the market, and these housing shortages in the city was addressed. So we actually are quite successful, I would say, but although we still not in the meeting the demand in the sector of building now a social housing for rent. But we have let's say there are some other measures that were also introduced by the new housing program, for example, cooperatives, and there we absolutely didn't succeed. You know, this is the model that we are still very much trying to introduce, but it just doesn't work. Basically, probably you know that this model it's very that it's the model it's alive in many European countries. It's a very successful model, but it's for now it doesn't work. There are also some other concepts of the one that Blanca has presented. So now they're building actually some kind of a, I would say, a substandard or smaller, let's say, dwellings for younger people, so to allow them actually to move from their families, you know, and to actually step into their adulthood also by actually living physically away from their parents. Slovenians are famous by some one more thing, that actually we are the young are staying extremely long with their parents. That's why statistically, basically, our youth, they don't have a very big housing problem, you know, and they live in a kind of a quite promising conditions, you know, but they're just not able to move away from their parents and to create their own household because of these shortages of the housing stock, particularly in the cities. And this is something that we're trying also to improve by now building up these communities for young that are also actually linked with, in this particular case, with a multi-generational center. So basically, they're also trying to create this kind of a mixed communities, you know, that also these young people would basically interact with the other population in the area and so on. So they're also kind of a social program. So it's not only housing program, it's also a social problem, a social program that is attached to that.
Thanks, Tomasz. And Sabrina and Dominique, also for you to reflect on housing. Sabrina, you spoke about overcrowded housing in some of the vulnerable communities in France. And is there a room for NUP to intervene for national urban policies to help in that situation?
We are trying. We are trying. In fact, we have we take things in another way with the committee, the CIV. We launched a measure, but it's really complicated to implement it. But we believe in it. It's where in cities where there is more than 40% of social housing, it will be forbidden to construct, to build other social housing. In fact, it's to avoid poverty concentration. So we are discussing on how to fulfill this promise, yes, this situation. And we have another measure, which is where to have 20% in municipality of social housing. Otherwise, they can have a penalty. But there is cities where they don't play the game and they prefer to pay instead of having social housing. So that's one of the NEP possibility.
Thanks. And Dominique, you spoke about some of the city projects and things like that. Is housing, is NEP playing a role in the provision and accessibility of housing?
It's actually playing a major role in national urban policy as part of the urban development support programs. But I was just going to respond to Sabrina shortly, because I remember reading this really interesting book by a French sociologist, Didier Ribon, The Return to Reims. And it's really, I don't know if you know it, Sabrina, but I think it explains quite well, you know, also how this whole situation came about, like many of the priority areas, something that we discussed earlier, what they actually have in common. And when we look at, you know, the history of many of these neighborhoods, also the ones that receive funds in our national programs, we do see that a lot is related, obviously, to housing, and that what Sabrina mentioned, the concentration of all different types of social poverty that is concentrated there. And this is where I think a lot of the problems derive from. So in order to address a problem, it's something that you have to look at closely. Where does it come from? So, and since housing is pretty much one of the sources of that, we also feel that it's very important to target this. And in Germany in particular, as part of the social cohesion support program, we do also address this and improve the standard of housing. We do invest a lot into construction, into mixed neighborhoods. We try to avoid this concentration as well. And at the same time, it's something that we also discuss with the other sub-departments. It's not necessarily only part of the National Urban Policy, but also of the sub-department for housing. And we're working on all different kinds of measures. And we also, Thomas said that, you know, for example, housing cooperatives doesn't work so well, but we really try to be also very open about, you know, new concepts, like what can actually work. We subsidize housing and so on. And we feel that it's, you know, working, not necessarily always working. I know of a few neighborhoods where they also tried it and it didn't work, but especially in the more, I don't know, you know, under, you know, less privileged neighborhoods, this can be difficult. But this is also why we have, you know, our pilot project, and this is also why we always, you know, rethink what we are investing to say that, okay, maybe some measures are not working, okay, let's drop it, let's do only the things that are actually working.
Thanks, Dominic. Yes, that as you said, housing is such an indicator in many cities about how equal, just, inclusive places are. So that's thank you all for speaking about the role NUP can play in hopefully advancing a more just housing system and housing market in cities. And just for our last round before we close, Leah, do you want to take it over?
Sure. It's a short question, but one that I think will also form a nice red thread throughout this entire week of national urban policies, namely, again, taking one step back and asking yourself the question, sort of what type of, like, what makes a national urban policy? Or shall we even talk about a national urban policy? We've had two examples of what in the OECD typology is called an explicit national urban policy. It's Germany and France, and also Slovenia, I think, showed that having an implicit national urban policy does not mean that there is no action and no focus on certainly these social issues that we've talked about today. So what I'd like to ask you, if you have an opinion on what for you makes a national urban policy. Is it a single policy? Is it a combination? Is it something else? How do you feel about this term? Maybe Slovenia first.
Yeah, let me try, and then Blanca. For me, actually, it's a set of different measures in very, very different fields. In our case, we actually have very small cities that are very, very much, I would say, interlinked with its functional areas. I think it really does not make sense to make, let's say, oh, we have now a special policy that it's only for the cities, and then if we would make that, then we'll be spent years, you know, fighting amongst each other, you know, trying to make boundaries between the cities and all the rest. So I think for me, actually, you know, it's not about that you need to have a policy as such, but that you have a measures that are actually specifically targeted for these very specific maybe issues that are only that are maybe more pronounced like in the cities than they're actually maybe in the countryside or in the very rural areas. You know, so for me this is a kind of a set of measures. But on the other hand, of course, you need to have certain goals that you link with the cities, because we as a, let's say as a planners, or that those who are us who are dealing with the spatial planning, we need to address these different sectoral policies, like the social policy, the housing policy, the I don't know, the cultural policy, the health policy, I know the natural policy, and so on. And we need, if we have a goals, actually we can actually communicate with them. We can actually express what really matters and what we need to take care of when we are also in sectoral policies dealing with these very special places that you call cities. So we need to know what we want. But it's not necessary that for this we have a specific policy that say, oh, this is land, this is now the urban policy of Slovenia that you have to follow. If you have we anyhow are in a situation where we have too many different strategies and action plans and so on, you know, that do not interlink. So I think it's much more important that we know what we want and then try to get into other policies.
I don't have much to say, just to that recognizing the differences among different territories helps us better address the challenges. And this is our red thread to the strategy. We know that the territories are different, and we should not want to apply equal measures to all, because that's not needed. We need to have tailored-made measures, and this is important also for urban, distinguishing from the other type of areas. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sabrina, can I ask you your take on national urban policy?
For me, it's a combination of policy and, as my colleague said, with objectives, because the situation in the city is different than in rural areas, for example, in France. So we have specific rural policy and specific city policy, but obviously we need also to make to build bridges between those two kind of policy. So that will be my answer, but we can discuss about it during days.
Yeah, nice and short. Thank you, Dominique, to close off this discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. I feel like, you know, my arguments are pretty much in line also with what Tamás and Blanca said. I feel like, you know, we need to have customized measures, that's for sure. So a place-based approach is the way forward. And at the same time, I do disagree to a certain extent, because I feel like, you know, urban policy is definitely interlinked with all different types of other policies. So something related to education, something related to transport, environmental protection. So as cities, you know, planners, we cover it kind of all. And this is why I would, you know, categorize it as one policy at the same time, saying that, you know, we as the national urban policy, we do also have, you know, this overall picture. So it's kind of like where we bring these different narratives together and these different fields together, and so that we can actually understand. And also, I think it's necessary to have this one policy, you know, following this integrated, holistic approach, and bringing together so that we can define and also always redefine, reinvent, like what kind of cities do we want to live in? How can we get there? How can we make sure everybody has access to different services? And of course, this is an individual thing, you know, like we all said, depending on the place, the city, neighborhood. But it's something that I feel is important to have as one policy, so we don't lose, you know, track of what's going on, so that we have this one wider, broader picture of something. I think national urban policy brings it all together, kind of, has this overall picture. It's like looking from the skies, you know, down, saying like, okay, this is, you know, we see it all, the bigger picture.
Great closing words, the bigger picture. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Blanca and Tomasz, for sharing really, really, really interesting insights, I think, in your national urban policies. And I now almost feel like that is not an adequate term, but obviously you've shared your insights on what is almost like a bouquet of approaches, of measures regarding the just city, and trying to approximate, because we will probably never achieve fully equitable places, cities, but still this just city or just places, to be more inclusive in language, is an ideal. Just green and productive places and cities are probably an even bigger ideal as put forward in the new Leipzig Charter. But I think we've seen that indeed there is a lot of activity in your countries and also in others, but we've heard from you, so thank you again for that. On these various themes, such as well, securing social cohesion, various types of accessibility, which I think came up as a key term, also social mobility related to housing, for example, in Slovenia and other places, education, and in general also integration, making sure societies stay open also to change and to new people. So again, thank you very much. I am closing this discussion, even though I would love to take it further, but we will have more opportunity actually to talk about also the intersections of the just, the green and the productive, with tomorrow 2 more sessions following and closing off this week of national urban policies. If you have not yet registered for tomorrow's sessions and you're interested in the green and the productive, feel free to still register by following the link you see in the chat. And also again reiterating the invitation to you to come and join us for an informal, virtual, for the time being, coffee moment on Thursday. So, well, for us, this is after the week has closed, and it's really open to everyone who would just like to sort of, you know, stand at the table together and exchange some thoughts. Well, obviously, if you have participated in this week, you will also be able to give us feedback, but that's not what it's about only. It's also about getting to know the audience of today, who have listened so patiently until now. And well, thank you also to them, to the audience, and thank you to Sena Segbetsi also for co-moderating this session, and to all my EUKN colleagues and OECD colleagues behind the scenes who made this session happen. We end in time. Thank you again. Make sure to join us tomorrow, and I wish you all a good end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.